Welcome to another video tutorial. In this video, I'm going to cover how to create a very basic quest from beginning to end. So this is often asked on the Discord, various different questions to do with quests. How do you do dialogue? How do you check whether you've got an item? That sort of thing. So I'm going to cover pretty much all of those very surface level in this video, just so you've got the basics to get you started with creating a very simple quest. And then from there, you can then experiment building upon what you then already know. But if you're coming to this program fresh and you want to know how to create quests in this thing, hopefully this video will be helpful in that respect. So we're going to do a dialogue-based quest for this video, where basically an NPC is going to ask you to find an item for them. So you'll pick up the item and then give it to them, and that will complete the quest. So this video will cover picking up items and checking whether you have those items in your inventory, and a dialogue file that will say different things depending on where you are in the quest. Okay? Now, I'm not going to be creating anything like models or buildings or anything like that in this video. I've already got the tiles and the characters and objects that we're going to use for this. So the first thing we need to do is we need to go to the quests tab, and you're going to click the Add Quest button. When you create a quest, every quest has this ID. In this case, this one, because it's the first one, is quest_0001. This button here allows you to copy this text to the clipboard. So if you ever need to refer to this quest in scripts or in dialogues, you can paste this now into your scripts and into your dialogues. We may not actually need to do that because most of the scripts actually automatically do this anyway if you're not writing it by hand. But if you are, you'll need to copy it from here if you need it. So let's call this script the Blue Book. And the description can just be find Bob's Blue Book. Every quest can also have a completion and a failure script. So depending on if you want something to happen when you complete a quest. So for example, you might have it so that when this quest is complete, you automatically get the next one, if that's how you want it. In which case, what you would do is you'd make a script where the code of the script fires off the next quest. And then that script, when saved, would be set here in the completion script section. You could also have a dialogue start or a monster spawn, all sorts of things. Whatever you want to have happen when this particular quest gets finished, you can set that here alongside a failure script if you want something to happen if this quest fails. We're not actually going to be using that in this video, so I'm not going to set any of those, but they're there if you want to use them. So we're going to save this quest. The next thing I'm going to do is, and you can do these in any order, but the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to place the items I need for my quest. So I'm going to place my NPC down and rotate him around with right click, and I'm going to left click to place him down on the path. I'm also going to select him and edit a couple of properties on the entity. I'm going to give him an ID, Bob. Now, it's a good idea whenever you're placing characters and objects that you're going to use in code to make sure they've got an ID, because that's how your scripts and dialogues will refer to this entity. The other thing I'm going to do is just scroll down to the behavior settings and set his movement area to immobile. That means he'll just stand there in place in game. That way we won't have to chase him around if we want to talk to him. So with that all in place, I'm going to save the map, and we can now move to the dialogue. Although what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to do things in a slightly different order than my previous video on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select Bob first, and I'm going to create a custom property. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to scroll down to custom properties with Bob selected, and we're going to open this up. And I'm going to set this to Boolean, which is basically a true or false type of thing. And we're going to add a property. And it will appear here. And I'm going to give this the name given quest. So this is going to be a check that we can use for has Bob given us the quest or not? Okay. And we'll save that. So now we're going to go to the dialog editor and we're going to start piecing things together. So let's now switch over to the dialog editor and I'm going to create a new dialog called Bob _ dialog, DLG. So when you create a dialog, you have the possibility of choosing how it starts. So how to begin the dialog. Do you start with the NPC saying something? Do you start with the player saying something? Do you start with just like a generic message, like a sort of narrative message? Do you start with a condition? And conditions are basically how you check the state of things. So for example, have you spoken to this NPC before? That's usually a good one to have at the beginning, which is pretty much what we're going to have. Script is when in your dialogue you can have scripts get fired off. We'll definitely be using that, but not at the beginning. Go-to nodes are good for jumping around the dialogue. We will be using that in a couple of places. Comment is just used for your own purposes as the developer of your game, just so you can leave yourself notes and things while you're making the dialogue, just for things you need to remember to either do or change or whatever. So in our purposes, what we're going to do is we're going to start with a condition node. So I'm going to click condition. So our dialog should now look like this. So what we have here is a condition that says if self, and self is always a reference to the entity that the dialogue or script is going to be attached to. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but we're going to use self for this because it's much easier. It's a shorthand that refers in this case to Bob. So if self.property, now this visited property is a built-in one. We don't need to add, we don't need to go and create this. It's already built into the game, but this starts out false. Okay. So what this is basically saying is, have we spoken to him before? Now at the beginning of every game, that should be false because you should have not spoken to any NPCs yet. So this node here, or path, if you will, this is what's going to happen if this is true. This one is what's going to happen if this is false. So because it starts false, all of the initial dialogue is going to happen in this section. Okay. So what I want to have happen is when I first speak to Bob, and I've just realized I've forgotten something, I'm going to go back into the map editor. I'm going to go to objects, and I've got this blue book here, which is going to be the quest object. I'm just going to place that in the map and put that on the bench there because we're going to need that later. I forgot to put that in place when I was doing the map editor stuff. Going back to the dialogue editor. So when we first speak to him, we want him to be all panicked because he can't find his book. So we're going to go to the dialogue tools tab. Now we're going to drag an NPC node into this gray box here. You'll see that when I drag the NPC node over this box, it highlights in green. So as long as it's still highlighted in green when you let go, it will put that NPC node in the right place. So this NPC node is going to say, help me, I can't find my book. And the player is going to respond to that. I'm just going to collapse. I can't do that for now. Should have enough room to do this. We're going to add a player node underneath. So I'm just going to click player, drag that, and you should see this green line appears underneath the NPC node. As long as that green line is there when you let go, it will add the player node into the right part of the dialogue. So the player can just say, what does it look like? And I realize there's a typo there. I will fix that. What does it look like? So this will allow, this will just demonstrate that you can also have player dialogues only say one thing, but you can also branch them, which we'll get to in a moment. The NPC can then respond to that. So once again, we'll drag an NPC node underneath the player node. If you find that you have issues with placing things, just collapse these to give yourself more room. So we're going to drag an NPC node underneath the player node. And this response is going to be, it's a blue book. And after that, we're going to have a choice. So there are two ways of doing player choices. One way is to drag the player node, because we're going to need one of those anyway, in as we normally would, wait for the green line to appear, let go. So it adds the player node to the right place. And then there's two ways you can make any choice. You can either click this button here, which splits into multiple choices. So if I click that, you can see it's created for us the choice branch system. Or another way is to, when you've got a player node, let's just do it again. When you've got a player node placed, you can just also drag another player node over the top. Make sure it's highlighted in green before you let go, and it does the same thing. So you pick which one you prefer. Obviously, you can have more than two choices. You can just click this button again, perhaps. Let's try it. And it should add a third choice. And you can also keep clicking it for how many choices you want. In this case, I only want two. So I'm going to get rid of the third one. So we've got these two choices here. So the first choice is going to be, let me help you find it. And then the other one can be, sorry to hear that. And let's just quickly do the sorry to hear that, because that's just going to quickly end the dialogue. So we'll drag an NPC node onto this choice branch for the sorry to hear that. Again, wait for it to be green, let go. And then this is just going to be, if you have time to help me, please come back. And that will end the dialogue. And then what we'll do is we'll quickly place the let me help you find it. This will be an NPC response as well into this branch. And this NPC response is going to be, thanks, let me know when you find it. And then what we want to have happen now is, well, the first thing we want to do is the moment we start speaking to Bob, this should become true because we've now spoken to him. So the first thing I'm going to do is, just after he says, help me, I can't find my book, is I'm going to add a script node just in between his comment and my response, where I'm going to set visited to true. Okay, and so that script is fine because it's setting it on Bob, which is self, and it's setting this now to true. So the next time we talk to him, this will be true, so he'll do this branch instead. Okay. Now, what we want to also have happen is, if we select this option that will help him find it, we also want to acknowledge that this is going to start the script, the quest. So we need a script node at the end of this as well that does a few things. So let's add a script node in between here. And this script is going to do a couple of things. I'm going to click the script window to open it up. And this is going to give quest. And it's going to start the quest. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is think about what happens if we loop round. So this is obviously going to be true the second time we speak to him. We need to check whether the first time we spoke to him, whether we took the quest or not. So what we need is a condition now in this thread. So I'm going to drag a condition into the if we have spoken to him before section. And this condition is going to check not for this property, it's actually going to check for the one we created earlier, which is given quest equals true. Okay, so we're going to check whether that's happened. And we should also, I forgot to do this, set that in our quest script here. When it gives the quest, it should also set entered, what is it? It's assign value, I think. We want to set self.property. Let me show you how to do this in the Visual Script Editor, actually. Oh, no, we can't do it that way anyway. But we assign value, and then this is going to be self, we don't need the dollar, self dot property, open brackets, speech marks, and given quest, given quest should be true. So that sets it to true now, because he's now given us the quest. To validate that, that's okay. So that's what this script does after we've said we'll help him, is it gives us the quest, but it also sets the property on him that says he has given us the quest. So if we speak to him a second time, we want to check whether that actually took place, whether he did give us the quest or not. So we have this condition here that says if self-property given quest is true. Let's just first of all deal with the fact if it's false. Okay, so we're speaking to him again, but we turned him down. We want him to say a similar thing to before, but just in a way that suggests we've spoken to him before. We already know who he is. So I'm going to drag an NPC node over this else for the false, for this being false. And this is going to be, I still can't find my book. Now, what we could do is we could continue on with a completely separate thread of dialogue with different player choices and everything. But the easiest thing to do in this case is I'm going to jump back now to this original branch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a go-to node. So I'm going to click and drag a go-to node underneath this one. Now this is going to jump to It's a Blue Book. And this is ID 0004. So I'm going to type that into the node ID box here, 0004. Okay. So that means when we get to this bit of dialogue, it's going to jump us all the way down here, and then we get our choice back. Okay. So in other words, the two paths now converge. So that's what happens if we speak to him and we haven't taken the quest. What if we speak to him again and we did take the quest? Well, we now need him to say something different. We want him to say, well, actually what we want to do now is we want to check if we have the item. Now we haven't set that up yet, so let's now deal with items. So we've got this physical book in our map, but we don't have an item representation for it. And you need to have item representations for things that are going to go into your inventory. So I'm going to create an item. I'm going to click this button here, and I'm going to call this Blue Book. And just like quests, every item has an ID, and it's shown here, item 001 in this case. But you can also, again, copy it to clipboard if you need to paste it anywhere. This can just be It's a Blue Book. And I'm going to create the image using the voxel editor. So I'm going to open up the Blue Book model and just get a good view of the book. Let's say that. And then I'm going to click Capture Portrait. Not Capture Thumbnail, so Capture Portrait. And frame it and click Accept. And we'll call this Blue Book. And click OK. And now we can go to the items editor again, and we can select Blue Book as the image. So when we pick up the Blue Book, that's what it's going to look like in our inventory. So this ID here, we can now use this, let's save, in our dialogue, because we can now add a condition to the if true, if given the quest is true, we now want to check, did we ever pick up the book? So this is going to be a check for player's inventory. Does it contain Blue Book? Now, if this isn't here, it just means you haven't saved your item yet. So make sure you've saved your item if you've made one. This is the code. Player.inventory contains, and again, bears that ID, item 0001. So this is now checking if we've got the quest and we've also got the book. Well, let's deal first of all if we don't have the book. So this is going to be an NPC node onto the else, on the false. And he can say, hurry up. I want my book. I want my book. I want my book. Okay. And that can just end the dialogue. But what happens if we do have the book? Well, this is pretty much going to be the end of the quest because we've achieved our objective at this point. So again, drag an NPC node over the true branch this time, and he can say, yay, you found my book. And then we want a script at the end that does a few things. So I'm going to drag a script node underneath the NPC node, like so. And this script is going to, first of all, complete the quest 001. Get rid of that. So that will complete the quest. We also want to remove the book from our inventory because we should obviously be giving it back to him. We haven't given ourselves the book yet. We'll get to that. But there's remove item 001, and that's the book ID, so that will work fine. And then the last thing I'm going to do is, and I'll explain why I'm doing this in a second, is I'm going to place a set dialogue script at the end. This can be a reference to self, because again, we are going to be placing this on Bob, so that will reference Bob. And I'm going to create a dialogue in a minute called Bob Quest Done. So the reason I'm doing the last bit, the dialogue, set dialogue bit, is to demonstrate that you don't have to put all your dialogues into one long, intricate, complicated, weaving dialogue file. You can actually, you know, if for example a quest bit of dialogue is done, you can also change the dialogue file, and that can make your dialogues just a little bit more easier and manageable, not getting so big and clunky and spider-webbed and complicated. So this is another way of sort of managing your quests, your dialogues. So I'll demonstrate that now. Let's save the dialogue and let's close this, create a new one, which will be called Bob Quest Done. Okay. And this is going to just be an NPC node where he'll just say, thanks again for helping me. And that will just loop through, and that's all it's going to do. So that's the dialogue that's going to replace this one at the end of the quest. So this should now work. We'll check it in a second. I'm just going to now, we obviously need to set the dialogue on the NPC because we created the dialogue, but we haven't told the NPC to use that dialogue. So now we need to select Bob, and in his properties, we need to go down to where it says character interacts in the behavior settings. When player interacts, we want to start dialogue, and we want the dialogue to be Bob dialogue. Okay. The other thing we need to do is we need to script picking up the book, because obviously it's all well and good having Bob tell us to pick up the book and check if we have the book, but we've got no way at the moment of picking up the book. So let's now quickly save the map and go to the scripts section and create a quick script called book. And this is just going to simply do a couple of things. First of all, it's going to give item. Let's click that off. It's going to give item, and it's going to give the blue book to the player. So that's fine. We can leave that as is. That's fine. We want the blue book to go to us. And then we're going to remove entity, and this is going to remove the book from the bench in the map. So remove entity. Self is going to reference the book, so that's fine because this script is going to go on the book. So self will always reference what it's on. Save that, and we can now go to the map, select the book, and go to entity properties, scripts, when character interacts, book. So now when we interact with the book, it's going to give us the book item and remove the model of the book. We also need to go to the connect tool and drag and click on the interact only, drag an interact line to the bench. Oops, that was too far. Drag an interact line to the bench so that we can actually interact with the book that's on the bench. So that should be the quest done. Let's make sure everything is saved and let's give it a test. So let's talk to Bob and see what happens. The first time we speak to him, he should say, help me, I can't find my book. We say, what does it look like? He says it's a blue book, and we've now got a choice. Let me help you find it, or sorry to hear that. Let's say sorry to hear that. And he says, if you have time to help me, please come back. So now we've visited him. That should be true now, so he should say something different. And also, he hasn't given us the quest yet. So it should say, I still can't find my book. Then it should jump us back to the original dialogue, where it says it's a blue book. That's the go-to node working. And we can just keep looping through now that section. Or we can branch off now and say, let me help you find it. He says, thanks, let me know when you find it. If we check our quest log now, we have the quest, the blue book, find Bob's blue book. And if we speak to him now, the quest should be active, but we don't yet have the book in our inventory. So he says, hurry up, I want the book. And he's just going to keep saying that over and over. So let's go pick up the book. There we go. The book is in our inventory. Let's check. There it is. Blue book. So if we go talk to Bob again, now we have the blue book in our inventory. It should complete the quest. Yeah, you found the book. And let's check. The book is gone because he's taken it. And the quest is gone because we've completed it. And now it should also have changed his dialogue. So all he says now is thanks again for helping me every time I click on the character. Let's also just quickly confirm by restarting the game what happens if we initially take the quest and just make sure that branch path works. Should do, but let's just be thorough. So we're going to walk to Bob, talk to him. So we haven't visited him yet. This is the first time we've spoken to him. And we're going to take the quest. So now let's just check. Yes, that still works. So that's good. So there you go. That's basically dialogues and quests. Let's just quickly go over the dialogue flow again, just so it's clear for you. Let's collapse all of this. So basically what it's saying at the beginning is, have we visited him before? Let's collapse everything. Let's click this button here. Have you spoken to Bob before? Okay. There's a then and an else. So else is if you haven't, then is if you have. So at the beginning we won't have done. So then it goes through all of this and says, help me find the book. And it immediately after he says that, it sets it to true because now we have spoken to him. It carries on the flow of dialogue and we get our choices and we either take the quest at that point or we don't. Whether we do or not, this will now be true. So when we speak to him again, this will happen. And what it does first is it checks, now you've spoken to him, did you take the quest? So in this case, let's say we didn't. So now it says, I still can't find my book. And then it jumps us back to the original thread so we can then get those choices again without having to retype them. And then we can again choose to ignore him or take the quest. If we do take the quest, then this will happen instead. And it then checks, have we taken the quest and do we have the item next time we speak to him? If we don't have the item, then he'll say, hurry up, I need my book. If we do have the item, then yeah, you found the book, and it removes the dialogue, changes it to something else, and gives him his book back and completes the quest. So that's dialogues in a very simplistic demonstration, but hopefully that's much more clearer. Let me quickly talk about killing a monster. So I'm going to place the goblin in the map, and let's go into his properties. Oh, one thing I should also show, I meant to show this, is if you want your dialogue when your characters speak, you want them to have portraits. That's done in the voxel editor. You position your camera how you want it to look. So I can zoom in on Bob here, for example, get a decent angle. Let's say I'm happy with that. And then you would click capture portrait, frame it, just like we did earlier with the blue book. You'd say accept. You'd choose, make sure you're happy with the portrait. You can give it a name. So let's say, even though it's called Bob, let's call it Barry. Okay. And then you'll get a image called Barry. And then in your model properties, just make sure the portrait is set to Barry. And then when Barry speaks, that will be his picture. And then obviously you want to do the same for your character and for any characters that speak. You can obviously also do that for inanimate objects. If this bench was to speak, you could have the portrait of the bench as well. So let's save everything. And we were dealing with goblin, killing the goblin, weren't we? So let's go back to the map. We've placed our goblin. Let's go into his properties, give him an ID, goblin. as I said, it's always a good idea to give your, first thing you should always do is give your characters and things IDs. So what we want to do is check if he's been killed. So let's say, for example, you might want an NPC to say something when you've killed a character, acknowledge, hey, you killed him, fantastic, or whatever. Or you just want to complete the quest once you've killed an enemy. How do you do that? Well, NPCs have an on-death trigger here, and you can set it to run a script, and then you put a script file here. So what you could do is go to the script editor and make a script that does whatever you want it to do, whether it be complete the quest, give you an item, or if you want an NPC in the dialogue to know whether you've killed an enemy or not, then you can either set a custom property on the goblin like we did with Bob. So here we could have a custom property called dead, and that starts false because he's alive at the beginning. And then in the script, when you kill the goblin, you would set that to true. And then in your dialogue, just like we've got here with if self-property given quest is true, you would say if goblin.property dead is true, then you would branch at that point and you would have NPCs say, yay, you killed the goblin or whatever. Yeah. So hopefully that's, I'm not going to obviously demonstrate that because this video has been going on, but I just wanted to at least cover it. So this should give you the basics for quests. Once you feel a bit more comfortable with quests, play around with, embellishing them, having messages pop up when you complete quests and things like that to let the player know they have completed the quest, they have done their objectives. I also recommend taking a look at Invaders/Sill's enhanced quest system video once you're a bit more comfortable with how basic quests work, because that's a really nice way of showing visually on the screen, keeping track of where you are in quests and when they've completed and things like that. So obviously at this point, the built-in RPG in a box quest system is a bit basic at the moment, but Invaders/Sill's system is quite a good one. But, build up to that because it's quite advanced. But this should just give you the basics so that at the very least, you should now know how to make quests very quickly and simply in RPG in a box. And then at this point, you can then play around and embellish your quests, add things to them. Now you know how they work. So hopefully this video has been helpful, and thanks for watching.